What is going on, Locks Mob, and welcome back to the Week 9 edition of Addy's Action. Seems like this NFL season is kind of flying by, but ever since we started these Addy's Actions Week 3, they've been doing awesome. The love you guys have been showing on these videos and on everything has been awesome. I know I start every video with this, but it really does mean a lot to see all the love you guys show. I mean, the last video we got over 5,000 views, which is crazy. Because I got 300 on the first Addy's Action, and that meant so much to me. So seeing this kind of love, it's really humbling. It really means a lot. So I appreciate it, guys. And before we get into these picks, and I got some fire picks for y'all, I'm gonna just show you my Twitter real quick. Go ahead and give me a follow at ReallyAddy if you're interested in a few more of these picks. I tweet out throughout the day. I always tweet about like NHL, NBA, NFL. If you have questions, reach out to me, interact, hit me in the DMs if you want to join the team, or if you just have questions. I do my best to answer all of those. As you can see, I don't have any unread DMs, so I do my best to get back to all of y'all. So yeah, hit me up on here, and also follow Locks DFS. If you don't know me, if this is your first time watching this video, I'm Addy. I'm from locksdfs.com. So if you haven't followed us yet, at ReallyAddy for me and at Locks DFS for my company. With that being said, I usually start these videos with a breakdown of last week's lineup that I went with. Because usually my lineup, as you guys know, I'm a one lineup kind of guy. So typically a few of those Addy's Action plays that I talk about, if not like all, I would love to get them all in, but there are GPP plays, so a few of them always do end up in my cash game or in my one lineup that I do run. And so that lineup for last week was this. As you can see on Addy's Action, Jameis Winston, he was the cover boy. We had Deshaun Jackson in that video as well as OJ Howard. And I believe I mentioned the Steelers defense, but obviously that was just sort of identifying the chalk kind of play. But as you can see on the ownership with Deshaun and Jameis, this is in the $150 tournament. This was enough. I think 157.4. It cashed me. I think I made 225 back on it. So I barely made cash in GPPs, but I cashed pretty easily in cash games. So it was a good week all around with this team. Another reason to follow me on Twitter is because I didn't mention Joe Mixon at all on Addy's Action. I ended up moving heavy on to Joe Mixon come like Sunday morning, and I tweeted about it. It might be a little bit down there, but I'm not going to pull it up. But as you can see, actually, we've been crushing NHL and NBA, so going for 8 straight wins today. But regardless, back to the point. I didn't get to talk about Joe Mixon because I didn't really move on to him until Sunday morning. So definitely follow me because I move on to a lot of guys come Sunday morning after news breaks and after we get injury reports and actives and inactives come out. So definitely just to keep up to date with all of that. But sort of my breakdown with this team is I was so high on Tampa Bay, as we know. I'm just super high on that quarterback position at Tampa Bay, regardless of who it is. So it was Jameis this week, and he did well. I mean, he did this in 2.5 quarters, and he got benched for the 4 picks. He got a touchdown taken away. He was 24 yards short of the passing yard of the 300-yard bonus, and he had almost a quarter and a half of garbage time. So he was going to put up at least another 15 fantasy points. I feel very confident in saying that. So the fact that he got benched kind of sucked, but he still did 2x, which is good enough. 2x being 2 times his salary, which is good enough. I mean, you really want like a little more than that, but 2x for 2.5 quarters, I'll take it. And before he left, he did hit Deshaun Jackson on a 60-yard touchdown, which meant a lot to me and my team. OJ Howard, same reason. I mean, these are all fantasy-friendly positions, like these skill positions in Tampa Bay, the wide receivers and the tight ends. So most weeks than not, I'd rather be overweight on them. I did fade Gurley in this lineup. I wasn't planning on it, but again, as I moved on Mixon, I had to get off someone, and I wanted the money to get my Robert Woods hedge on Todd Gurley. So yeah, this was the team. Was able to survive the Martavis goose egg, which in hindsight was probably a poor process play. Probably shouldn't buy in on any John Gruden perimeter wide receiver regardless. The fact that he was chalk, I mean, it kind of speaks to that groupthink sort of nature in DFS. And that's the nature that we're looking to take advantage of with these videos because these are GPP videos. So with that all being said, Last week's Addy's action, Jameis, Larry Fitzgerald did awesome as well. Deshaun Jackson was a beast. So it was a really good week. So regardless, we're forward thinking. I've already spent 5 minutes talking about the past, so let's move on to the future. And let's talk about this week's slate of games. I got 5. I got about 5 to 7 GPP plays for you guys, but I'm gonna talk about a lot of plays that I like in general, sort of where I think the chalk will be, and where I am gonna go based off of that. So let's just get into quarterback. Looking at QB this week, I think most ownership projections I've seen so far have Cam Newton as the chalk, sort of the overwhelming chalk, and I tend to agree with that. I'll probably end up rolling out Cam Newton as well. 6,600 seems pretty cheap for him, so I'll definitely go here, and he's got an awesome matchup versus Tampa Bay. Jared Goff is another guy that's been popping in some ownership projections, rightfully so. This should be a matchup where his pass attempts are elevated versus New Orleans, as New Orleans should have the lead, or at least that's what Vegas projects, as we can pull it up here. Or I guess actually, my apologies. This is flipped since the time since we recorded the early pod, which if you haven't checked out, check that out as well. This is flipped as we talked about. It seemed weird that the Saints were favored, but regardless, the Saints are expected to put up points, which should mean that Jared Goff should be passing. And that's kind of when Jared Goff can reach his ceiling, obviously, because ideally that team would like to just run the ball with Todd Gurley. But that Saints run defense is pretty good, so they could let Jared Goff air it out a bit more with Cooper Kupp back. So I think he's a good chalk play as well. But for the sake of Addy's action, I am going to come right back down to the Tampa Bay quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Nothing changed. I read an awesome little stat. I think Evan Silva had it in his article. The Bucs quarterback position averages more fantasy points per game than the number one QB in fantasy, which is Pat Mahomes. The Bucs quarterback position. So that speaks a lot in as far as scheme goes, because that is so important in NFL DFS, understanding what coaches are looking to do, how they play, and their tendencies. So this team, Todd Monken, their offensive coordinator, he loves to air the ball out, and he loves to play fast. Tampa Bay has the third highest situation neutral pace. They like to push the tempo. They average 69 plays a game. That's fourth in the NFL. They average over 450 yards of total offense. That's first in the NFL. And you're getting sort of the gunslinger behind all of this at 5.5K. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. He also has a pretty good matchup. I mean, Carolina ranks 20th in the league versus the pass. A few of his pass catches are in good spots as well. Carolina ranks 19th in the league in adjusted sack rate. They don't really get too much pressure on the quarterback. That should give Ryan Fitzpatrick a fairly clean pocket. He should be facing a negative game script, which is a positive thing for him, like we've talked about. Negative game script just means that he should be trailing. Positive game script means someone should be leading. So you really want to take running backs in positive game script and quarterbacks in negative game script. But so they should be trailing. Vegas has them trailing, but Vegas, like last week, there is a slight amount of movement on the Bucs as far as the fact that they've received 42% of the bets on their spread at +7, and they've moved to +6. That shows you that this 42% holds more money than so I mean, it's just where the sharps are. This 42% has more money than this 58%. This 58% would be what we refer to as the public, and you typically want to fade the public, and the public seems to be on Carolina. So I'm high on Tampa Bay. The over has jumped a point, which is nice, 54 to 55. And it doesn't really seem like people are talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick as much as they should. He's 1.1K cheaper than the guy on the other side of this. So truthfully, if I do fade Cam Newton, which is going to be a tough call to make because he's the whole offense basically. I'll probably fade him for Fitzpatrick if I were to, though, because I'm really high on getting. I mean, you could almost view this as the QB1 in fantasy. I mean, that's what this position yields, the QB1 in fantasy, and it's 5.5K. This is like the 15th, 16th price quarterback, even lower maybe. So lock in Ryan Fitzpatrick and GPPs for me. And honestly, come Sunday morning, If he's in my cash game lineup, don't be surprised because there's a good chance he'll end up there. With that being said, let's move on to running back. So running back was a little hard this week because I think there's going to be a lot of chalk on Todd Gurley. Obviously, I think Christian McCaffrey is probably my favorite point per dollar running back play this week versus a totally banged up Tampa Bay defensive front that's missing also their Pro Bowl linebacker and Quan Alexander. McCaffrey should eat these guys alive on the ground or through the air. Very high on Kareem Hunt as well. In a good spot versus a Browns defense that struggles versus the run, but is not too bad versus the pass. Alvin Kamara seems underpriced at 7.3K. And again, I'm just identifying where I think the chalk will be because I think the chalk in this week, as most weeks have played out, is just paying up for running back. I think anyone who may have not paid up for running back last week, they got burnt because James Conner went off, Kareem Hunt did well, Joe Mixon went off, and Todd Gurley went off. So I think people are just trying to pay up for running backs now, which again leaves paying up for wide receiver to be a good contrarian strategy as far as just a build goes. But again, just talking about the running back chalk, I think it'll be Kamara, Hunt, McCaffrey, Gurley, and all of these guys rightfully so. I'm not going to really talk too much about him because Taylor, as you know, makes a cash game video, so he'll probably touch on these guys more than I will. But just know I like them all a lot. But for the sake of this video, I was trying to find a few running back plays, man, that I thought would be under-owned. And it's tough because I think it's going to be I really like the idea of paying up for these running backs. But I like Phillip Lindsay here at 5.5K. He's not the guy. He's not the Addy's action take. I like him, and he was going to be the Addy's action take because I think Royce Freeman is going to be out. And I think if you're getting a sort of RB1 in what should be positive game script versus Houston, I think it's a good spot, man. His price should have gone up a little bit because he did well last week as well. So I'm definitely on Phillip Lindsay at 5.5K. But the reason I didn't want to talk about him because I think once the Royce Freeman news comes out about Royce Freeman being out, which I suspect he will be. I mean, Denver has a week 10 bye. It doesn't make sense to bring him back a week before the bye. And those kind of injuries that he has, I think is a high ankle sprain. It can last a while. So I would let him rest for that week 10 bye and bring him back. And the coach talked about how he's viewing that week 10 bye as a key factor in whether or not to bring Royce Freeman back. So I think once Royce Freeman's out, Phillip Lindsay will probably become chalk. So I'm not going to talk about him. I was going to mention Kenyon Drake as a pivot off of Phillip Lindsay if he does become chalk at a similar price range. I think Kenyon Drake, for the same reason Tariq Cohen kind of went off versus this Jets defense. This Jets defense struggles with pass-catching running backs. They struggle versus the screen pass, which Kenyon Drake and this Miami offense does very, very well. So I think, and Kenyon Drake also gets, 10 to 13 carries on the ground, which is always good versus a pretty bad run defense in the Jets. I believe they ranked 22nd in the league versus the run. So I like Kenyon Drake as well. But for this video, my Addy's action take, and this is a GPP video because my take, I should give you a take on this game in general, but this Cleveland KC game is very interesting to me. I think the public is a lot higher on Kansas City than I think. They rightfully should be. This offense is awesome, but I think the public is really, really overweighting Kansas City as far as they're an amazing offense, but on the road, going west to east on a 1 p.m. start time, this is typically a spot where you would fade offensive players. I'm not saying you're going to fade KC offensive players, but I am saying that I think Cleveland's going to keep this game more competitive than we think. Vegas agrees on that as well. There's pretty heavy reverse line movement in favor of Cleveland. I mean, they're only receiving 16% of the bets, yet they have dropped from plus 8.5 to plus 7.5. That's noticeable line movement, very noticeable line movement. The fact that they're getting 16% of the bets, that means, again, this 16% has more money in it than this 84%. So these 84% of people who are betting on the Chiefs, they don't have enough money. They're not betting as much money as the sharps are. This 16% is where the sharps are. So I tend to side with the sharps and fade the public, as we talked about. So I'm on board on Cleveland keeping this game closer, maybe even upsetting them. Heard it here first. I think Cleveland might upset them, upset the Chiefs this week. And for that reason, my Addy's action running back is Nick Chubb. Kansas City, 32nd in the league versus the run. Actually, let me click on his name. Kansas City's 32nd in the league versus the run, and as you can see, they're still feeding him touches despite last week was negative game script. They were trailing to Pittsburgh, yet he still got 18 carries and 3 targets, which is noticeable because Kansas City struggles versus pass-catching running backs as well. Kansas City fired Hugh Jackson, fired Todd Haley, finally, about time. They replaced him with a better offensive mind, which doesn't say too much, but a guy who had success calling plays in preseason, and I think he'll have success again in this matchup versus Kansas City. I think they feed Nick Chubb because their offensive line, this Cleveland offensive line, as far as pass protection, ranks last in the league, and this Kansas City pass rush is fairly formidable. I think they're 7th in the league in adjusted sack rate. So the cure to that is being able to establish a solid ground and pound game. And I think they do that in Nick Chubb this week. I think they feed him maybe 20 touches. And if you're getting 20 touches at 4.5K, I mean, lock that in, especially versus a bad defense. And I think there's this notion that this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, like the public being higher on Kansas City than they should be. I mean, Kansas City just came off 2 home games. Kansas City at home averages, I think they give up 18.8 points per game, but on the road that number jumps to over 32 points per game. Don't get tricked into thinking this Kansas City defense is good just because they did well in 2 good matchups at home. This is still a bad defense, and they give up over 32 points per game, and I think on the road, and I think people forgot that. So I'm really high on this Browns offense. Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku is going to be under-owned. Especially after his dud last week. So I love going back to this Browns offense, especially now that Hugh Jackson's out of there. So anyways, let's move on to wide receiver. One game, I got 2 wide receivers for you guys, sort of they are in the same game. One of them, I hate talking about really expensive players as far as GPP options, because a lot of people think like GPP only, like sleepers and value can only mean cheap players. That's not true. Value means whoever you think is going to get value, like whoever's going to exceed their. Let's say like you got a 7K receiver. Value for him is going to be like what, 20. You want like 18 to 20 fantasy points. Like if you can project him for 30 fantasy points, that's your value. That's your sleeper. Despite the fact that he's a higher owned player. A higher priced player. So. For this week, with that all being said, that little sort of tangent, I like Adam Thielen a ton this week. And for some reason, he's not going to be owned. Because, again, like we talked about, people love paying up for running backs, and rightfully so. I think with this running back, and flex spot, you should be looking to get 65 to 75 touches out of these guys. And I think people are just so bent on that they're going to get their running backs in, and I don't disagree with that. I think that's probably the most optimal route to go in cash games. But Adam Thielen, this guy is a freak. Like this, I'm not going to give you the 100-yard thing. And I actually avoided talking about him on the look ahead that we did, the look ahead podcast that Christian and I did. I avoided talking about him because I thought he would be chalk. Now he's not popping as chalk. This guy's going to avoid Darius Slay because he's going to be running his routes in the slot. And the most interesting fact about this is this Minnesota offensive line is a mess, right? They're horrible. They're missing two of their starters, and they're already allowed a ton of pressure. This Detroit defense, like I talked about on Addy's Action last week, is very sneakily the highest. They have the highest adjusted sack rate as far as their defensive line goes. So you can reasonably expect Detroit to put a ton of pressure on Kirk Cousins on Sunday. So you might be wondering, Addy, why do you want to play a wide receiver then? Because Kirk Cousins is the number 1 passer in the league versus the blitz. He does extremely well when pressured. And the reason why is because every time Kirk Cousins is pressured, he overwhelmingly targets Adam Thielen. He just chucks the ball to Adam Thielen anytime there's pressure. So I think he's going to face a ton of pressure this game, and I think that's going to lead to a ton of targets for Adam Thielen. I think Detroit can put up some points against a banged-up Minnesota defense that looks like they might be missing Xavier Rhodes this weekend as well. So I think this game could sneakily turn into a shootout, and I want all the Adam Thielen if that happens. Regardless, I think Adam Thielen, if you're not paying up for running back, I think Adam Thielen is just as safe as paying up for a running back. Because the reason people are so comfortable paying up for running backs is the guaranteed touches. Adam Thielen is guaranteed targets, and this guy is so efficient with his targets. I mean, he's not going to bust. So I love locking in Adam Thielen at a discounted ownership as well. I mean, this guy, he's amazing. So lock him in and then run it back, right, with my second Addy's Action wide receiver, and that's going to be Kenny Golladay. This is sort of just a hedge on what seems to be kind of a chalky Marvin Jones Jr. Every time Detroit plays Minnesota, they tend to shadow Marvin Jones Jr. with Xavier Rhodes. So if Xavier Rhodes plays, I do think he'll shadow Marvin Jones Jr., which will let Kenny Golladay kind of eat against Trey Waynes and sort of the backups, Marcus Sherrills, those guys. So I really like Kenny Galladay's prospects in that case. And if Xavier Rhodes is out, I also like his prospects just as much because obviously they're missing their Pro Bowl stud cornerback. Kenny Golladay, he's only gotten 3 targets since their Week 6 bye, so people are very nervous about that. All I wrote down next to Kenny Galladay's name is he ran 46 routes last week, so the routes are still there, and then target regression. Target regression, I mean, I don't really talk about it too much, but this is a guy who received targets of 12, 9, 7, 4, and 9 prior to their Week 6 bye, and after that, 2 and 1. Now they've traded Golden Tate. That's 10 targets per game. That's got to go somewhere, and there's only 2 places it can really go: Kenny Golladay on one side and Marvin Jones on the other. And I'm going to go ahead and buy low on Minitron right here. I mean, this is a guy who was priced in the mid-6s just not too long ago. We've already talked about him being an explosive talent. He does rank second on the league in air yards to I'm pulling up airyards.com, by the way, for anyone who might just be listening to this. He does rank second in the league in air yards to Marvin Jones Jr., but his target share is his target count is only 3 behind him, yet he also has more receptions than Marvin Jones Jr. Weighted opportunity rating slightly lower, but again, I like both these guys, but for the discounted ownership and just like betting on talent, I'm definitely, and the fact that he's 200 more really makes me think that nobody's going to play Kenny Golladay. Because if anyone wants to target this Minnesota pass defense that looks to be a little banged up, I think they're just going to look at 2 Detroit wide receivers and they're going to pick between these 2 guys. People already like Marvin Jones Jr. the most. Like, they already like him more. He went off last week, and he's cheaper. So I think people are comfortable clicking him in. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Kenny Golladay Jr. With that being said, let's move on to tight end. Tight end, another interesting week. Travis Kelce shaping up to be chalk, and I like that call as well. I think Tyreek Hill will struggle against Denzel Ward. Maybe, I mean, Denzel Ward's a shutdown quarterback, but Tyreek Hill can get his in one play. But I think for the most part, Denzel Ward will do a good job on Tyreek Hill. I think Kareem Hunt could have a really good game, but I think targets are going to get funneled towards Travis Kelce versus a Browns defense without their Pro Bowl linebacker has been thrashed by tight ends. So Travis Kelce chalk, and deservedly so. Greg Olsen also chalk versus a bad Tampa Bay pass defense versus every position, tight end included. And so my GPP play is going to be right in the middle, Jordan Reed. Every time I talk about Jordan Reed, it's sort of, I mean, it's not sexy. It's not pretty. It used to be a real sexy name a couple years ago, but now it's sort of been associated with injuries and ineffectiveness now that Alex Smith is here. But again, this guy got 12 targets last week. He is their best option on airyards.com. I had it pulled up prior, actually, going back to it. We're just going to look at all these weeks combined. So this year, and then we're just going to filter it by target. He leads them by target by 12 targets over the next guy who's not even playing. Chris Thompson's not playing this week. So he's really like he's the one in this pass game. We talked about how Atlanta funnels targets towards the middle of the field. You guys probably already know my theory on that. High-scoring offenses like to funnel targets to the middle of the field, sort of just avoid getting beat on big plays. And I think they're going to do that. And I think Jordan Reed's a guy that you could probably reasonably project to hit double-digit targets. I don't think 10 targets is close to out of the question. And so if you're getting 10 targets at 4.8K, versus, again, an Atlanta defense that, like we've always targeted tight ends, pass-catching running backs, slot wide receivers, guys who run their routes in the middle of the field. We've always targeted them versus Atlanta for that reason that I talked about earlier. So I'm going back to Jordan Reed this week. Another guy I like a lot is David Njoku. I talked about him earlier. He's 4.6K. No one's going to play him. I think he was fat chalk last week, and he got burned. I talked about why I didn't like David Njoku last week. He was on the road at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a really good defensive line. And I thought on the road, that horrible Cleveland offensive line would have struggled pass protecting. I thought David Njoku would block a little bit more. I was wrong about that, actually. David Njoku just put up a goose egg because Baker Mayfield didn't have time to throw. I talked about that as well. But David Njoku, the routes were there, which is what was important. The routes were there. The snaps were there. So the opportunity was there, just the results weren't there. So that's always a week that I'm willing to buy back in on another guy, on a guy who I mean, this guy was chalk last week, and he's got a better matchup this week versus the Kansas City defense that's 28th in the league versus the tight end. So I love David Njoku, and I love Jordan Reed as well at tight end as awesome GPP pivots off of what seems to be a fairly chalky Greg Olsen and Travis Kelce. Finally, like I always talk about, defense. I'm not in the business of projecting defensive ownership. I think defense is such a high variance position. Just play who you really like. Play whoever you think will get pressure on the quarterback. This week, my couple defenses I like this week. I like the Broncos defense here at 2.3K. I think that's really good value for, again, what you're looking for with the defense is pressure on the quarterback. Ideally, a turnover prone QB, but you really just want pressure because the main way you accumulate points as a defense is through pressure because pressure leads to takeaways, and takeaways is how you get points. So the Broncos defense, I think that Houston offensive line is just a mess. The Broncos pass rush has come alive the past few weeks. Bradley Chubb is really coming into his own. Von Miller, obviously we know Von Miller's amazing. This Houston offense is also going to miss Will Fuller. Their numbers drop significantly without that deep threat to threaten a defense. So I think without that, I don't really project, again, going into Denver. It's a tough place to play in altitude. I think it'll be a tough go for Houston, despite the fact that they're hot and they just kind of went off on the island game last week. I really like the Broncos this week. I think if you want to ride this Browns take with me that the Browns might beat the Chiefs, I think getting the Browns defense is 2K, pretty interesting. Just because it's a bet on talent. This Browns defense is really good. Like, they're bad versus the run. We've seen them get ripped apart versus the run. But at home versus the pass, I think only 2 of the past 6 QBs to face them have had multi-touchdowns. So they got a shutdown cornerback in Denzel Ward. They got a few other key defensive pieces on that team with Ogunjobi and Myles Garrett. So I really like this Browns defense. And I think at 2K, I mean, if you want to bet on Kansas City just hitting a huge wall of regression and all these touchdowns stopping and all of that, which I don't think is maybe the sharpest bet, but I do think it's valid in this week. I think getting a 2K defense is awesome. And it pairs really well with Nick Chubb, sort of that defense running back correlation play, as does the Broncos pair with Phillip Lindsay. So those are kind of the 2 defenses I'm looking at. Obviously, the Bears defense is probably going to be the chalk, and I mean, they probably should be versus Nathan Peterman. If I have the money for it, I'll pay up for it, but you'll rarely see me pay over 4K for a defense. I'm typically the pay down for defense and just hope I get pressure kind of roll. So with that being said, y'all, we are still running that giveaway about like it's like I told y'all, it's not like a formal giveaway, but what we do is we always just go through our YouTube comments on every video. We go through our Twitter interactions, just people who are just interactive with positive stuff, whether that be just like compliments or whether that be their own takes, because we really are interested in what you guys have to say. So give us your own takes. Let us know what you're looking at for this week 9. It's a really interesting week of football, so comment below. Let me know your favorite GPP play. Let me know who you're looking at this week. Just let me know your favorite plays in general. Let me know how you thought I did on this video or what you want to see in the future from these videos. So, yeah, let us know. We'll be going through. We'll pick someone to win either a free NFL, NBA, or NHL season pass, all valued at $250. So super awesome value. So I definitely recommend that y'all take advantage of that. And with that being said, again, appreciate you guys finding your way back to this video. If you're new here, please do like, comment, subscribe. If you're a returning viewer, please do like, comment, and subscribe. It really means a lot. But with that being said, y'all, I hope you guys win some money in week 9. Hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. And with that all being said, yeah, peace.